Hello there and welcome to this vlog of November 2024, and in today's video I'm going to talk about MechWarrior 5 clans. I'm going to give it a review, go through several points including things like lore, accuracy to the setting, what I thought of the story, the gameplay, the future DLC, and then I'll kind of sum it up and give a final review. So this could be a relatively long video. You always know it's going to be long if I say that. But I don't know. It could be 30 minutes, it could be an hour. It depends what weird and wonderful trajectories I take and tangents. But suffice to say, it's been out for like nearly a month now as MechWarrior 5 Clans. When I first got it, I just couldn't click with it. I think it was mostly to do with the fact that I was playing it quite disjointed. So I'd do a mission and then I'd get really busy at work, and then I went down to London and I came back and did another mission, and then I went down to London again, and I just couldn't get into the flow of doing it. So I took a step back. I saw that they had a couple of patches scheduled to release for it, so I waited until those patches were released, which I think they came out quite well. I think the third patch came out several days ago. That nicely coincided then with a little bit of time off work, so I was able to kind of sit down and play it for a few hours a day until I've just finished it this evening, which is why I am recording late at night now, because I'm ready to go back to work tomorrow, or as ready as you can ever be. So yeah, I thought I'd squeeze this video in quite late at night, just before I get too hectic again, because you all know my recording schedule has been just shot to pieces recently. But I really did want to do this because I felt like this game really did justify a little bit of a detailed review and a synopsis of what happened during its during the time that it takes place, which is during the clan invasion, obviously. Before we get into this though, spoilers ahead. I'm going to talk about every spoiler in the game, or at least from there are two roads that you can take at one point in the game. As you would probably expect, I took the one that was sympathetic to the inner sphere. I think the Warden route, I think they called it after the Warden clans, or you could take the Crusader route after the Crusader clans. So the Warden route one is certainly one that I very much wanted to do. And if there is any future time with DLC and you continue on from where you are at, I want to be in that Warden universe. I don't want to be one of the clan Crusaders. I don't think they'll do that though, but that's just in case. I thought, well, I'll do that. I've really got no interest in playing the Crusader missions. I would guess that it's just the same missions. It's just that you play with Mia, and you're just on the other side of it, right? So rather than defending, you are attacking. What I'll do at some point, I'll go and find somebody's playthrough of that and just have a look, because I really just got no interest in doing it myself. I couldn't muster the energy to want to play it as an invading clan. Even up to that point, I felt like I was slightly disenfranchised from the game because I just don't like the clans very much. But as soon as the Wolf Dragoons rocked up, I was like, oh, okay, I'm back on board with this. So yeah, but we'll get into all that because I don't want to, I'll go through this step by step. So, predictions then. I did a prediction video before the game came out, so that will approximately have been about a month ago now. And I pretty much predicted in its entirety where I felt this game would go. Some of it was obviously from the review, so we talked a lot about Turtle Bay in there. Which is kind of the linchpin moment of the game, where there is the genocide committed by Cordera Perez and the Smoke Jags against the Draconis Combine, where they basically just level an entire city and kill millions of people. I presume it's millions anyway. I'm not actually 100% sure, but yeah, it's a heinous war crime anyway. And the rest of the game after that, like it just constantly gets referred back to. So we knew that from the trailer. I then predicted, because they showed the guy just rock up. He turns out to be like a colonel in the Wolves Dragoons, although I didn't make note of his name, unfortunately. But I thought at that juncture, there's a very good chance that you'll end up like betraying the Smoke Jags and fighting for the Inner Sphere. Actually, you get the best of both worlds, because as I have already intimated, you can choose your path. So you can go and continue on with the Smoke Jags, or you can side with the Inner Sphere and protect Luthien against the invasion, which is what I did, and I think probably the more interesting of the stories, although I can't say that with a surety because I didn't play through, I've not played through the Crusader ending, obviously. So yeah, I was pretty chuffed when I was playing through it. I was like, oh, I predicted pretty much all of this, even down. I think I did some like predictions on, although this one was easy, but I spoke about a lot about the mechs that I thought we'd see, and okay, yeah, that's not really a prediction because there is like a whatever it is, like a 15 to 20 clan mechs in that initial invasion that are used like all the time, like Timberwolves and Summoners and Mad Dogs, trying to give them their clan names now, which is tough. But yeah, it was one of those situations where I'm glad that my prediction was right. What I wouldn't have liked to have seen was just like a really two-dimensional story that was quite dull. I think if you do that with the clans, you're in a lot of trouble because the clans are generally quite two-dimensional anyway. So it really did need some like variety in there to spice things up, which I certainly think we got in this game. So let's talk about then. Let's go into lore and accuracy. Accuracy in terms of like the chronology and the storyline, as far as I am aware, was like 100% correct in regards the dates and the times of the clan invasion. Don't think they changed anything. There is a bit where you get stuck on that like desolate world, where you commit kind of another war crime at the interestingly named Saint Tropez, which Saint Tropez is like a beautiful place on Earth, and they name this like industrial horror show. It's like something out of Blade Runner. Like the opening shots of Blade Runner of all the industrial factories. It's like a coastal town that's obviously been ironically named Saint Tropez. So you do that, like, you that bit I didn't know that much about because I think that's a bit of a secondary part of the Smoke Jags clan invasion. But I was glad that they did something like that, which is a little bit off the beaten track, because at that juncture, like the invasion has stalled, so all the Trueborns and the Omni-Mechs are kind of just used in almost like second line duty until they decide that the invasion is a go again. So that was actually probably the most interesting part of the entire game, just as like a look at how the clans deal with like peace and and dealing with it very badly generally, which is probably what you'd expect. So yeah, again, lore accuracy in terms of like chronologies and mechs and things like that, pretty much bang on. I mean, there are a couple of differences in the mechs, obviously. Like I noted that I think it was like the Warhawk. They changed like the LRMs from the left torso down to the left arm. I always remember looking at that because whenever you see a Warhawk, there was like this derpy LRM-10 like hanging off its forearm, which is quite weird. No doubt they had a reason for doing that, but yeah, little things like that in terms of like the core lore were a couple of like variations, but generally speaking, I think it was a very, very, very lore accurate game, which I'm not that bothered about. I know a lot of people get very het up about things like that. I think I do in a narrative sense, in terms of like if I'm reading a book, but you play to your medium. And I think with a computer game like MechWarrior, you've got to kind of do a decent level of variety, even if it kind of sits outside what is lore accurate. If it serves the gameplay or the the story that you're trying to tell, then yes, change it, because there's no point in just being so strict to it that you end up like going down a path which leads you into like a boring cul-de-sac, right? Like I just think that's a silly mistake to make, and they didn't do that in this game, which I was glad about. And it's quite risky with the clans because they're so, you know, they do their thing and they're very like violent and vocal and not very likable, and you've got to be careful you can't not make your protagonists, you know, likable to some extent, otherwise people will like lose thread of what's going on. That then gets me into the, I suppose, the more controversial sides of it, which I've already answered my question on it in terms of how I feel about it. But let's talk about them anyway, because I've not actually looked far online to see what people are saying about MechWarrior 5 Clans, but I would guess that like the core BattleTech fans will be quite grumpy about a couple of things. The first is the like unclan-like behaviour by the you know, the little star that you are taking forth. And it kind of occurs quite early in one of the Santander missions where you've got to do like a stealth mission as the clans, and I don't know if this is just my like misrepresentation of the clans or my misunderstanding of the clans, but why on earth would the clans do sneaky type missions? I mean, there must be a book where they've done something like that. And I've actually spoken at length previously on this channel about why the clans are actually just liars, and all the kind of little nuances that they have on their culture. They kind of just set them aside when it, you know, when it doesn't benefit them. I think that's a big issue, and I think people kind of misunderstand clan culture a little bit within the kind of setting of the game. But for this one, like, clans sneaking around doing like covert missions and secret bombing is just not what we associate with the clans. Eventually, probably yes, like when they've really kind of incorporated into the inner sphere and they know the inner sphere like well enough to know that the inner sphere, there are no dirty tricks that the inner sphere won't play to win, so they have to adapt to that. But this is like the very first like days of the clan invasion, where the clans are like very idealistic and, you know, could just like wipe away the pirates of Santander, which they do obviously in this game. And it's good that, again, that they create it as an interesting tale, as opposed to it just being like, yeah, you just rock up and kill all the pirates and then move on. It actually is very fascinating how they do that. And I loved that first part of the game where you've got to really like go up against some duplicitous, weird behaviour by the pirates, which is what you expect, and like seeing the clans come to term with the dirty tricks. Where I think they did cross a line though, and this might be my bias like creeping in here about the clans, but in that certain mission you actually find these like people that I presume they're being like human trafficked by these pirates, and like the clans are just like, oh my goodness, these people are these poor innocent people. Well, the game goes at length to tell us about filthy free births, right? And how the clans hate free births. Like the clans don't care about like their own free births, let alone like inner sphere free births at the bottom of the tree who are being human trafficked. It's completely like outside of the scope and spectrum of what the clans would do, that they would care, especially the warrior cast. Like you potentially would find that with, in fact, I will say this, you would find that absolutely amongst the free births of a free birth like cast or whatever you want to call them of the clans. You know, maybe within like the merchant cast or the workers class, but absolutely 100% not in the warrior cast. It really does them a disservice in terms of the law. However, I completely understand why they did it, because they want to show that the characters that you are like living through vicariously are not monsters. Unfortunately enough, though, for the game, the clans are monsters, and the clan Smoke Jaguars are like the worst monsters of the monsters. So it just was quite jarring, and that kind of set the thread then for all the things that happen across this storyline, where you end up betraying clan Smoke Jaguar, which in the back of my mind is just like, this would never happen. Like, these kids were brought up as like child soldiers. Like, they are so like brainwashed by their culture. I just can't see any of them like acting empathetically. But whatever I'm saying on that now, I'm saying that objectively and to kind of play devil's advocate. I 100% agree with the way or the direction that they took this game, and like all the like spoilers, the like the conflict that occurs between like Mia and Ezra and Jaden, specifically those three characters in terms of like one being an extremist, one being a bit, well, Mia becomes an extremist. But they have like a role reversal in the initial stages of the game. Ezra's the one that's quite extreme, and Mia's quite chill. And then Liam's death, he dies about halfway through the game. They basically have like a swap of characters. Like, she goes full clan and slightly nuts, and she has like the neural implants put in, which if you know about that, you know that actually makes you insane. It's kind of the last roll of the dice for an older clan warrior who's kind of not, maybe he's going to be or she's going to be put in a Saloma unit soon, so they get those like implants in to kind of get the best out of themselves, but it will literally drive you mad, and you'll probably just end up as an early death. And she's obviously very young and gets this done, which Jaden brings up with her. He's like, there's like a cut scene where she's like complaining of a migraine after she gets it done, and it's then he kind of spells it out in terms of what this means for her, that it puts her on borrowed time basically. So it is very sad, but that's actually her story is by far the most accurate in terms of the clans, and that's why I can forgive a lot of like what they did with Ezra and Jaden and Naomi as well, I think she's called, who's the kind of character who's not with you at the very beginning, because Mia sums up everything to do with clan culture. That's a very good like 101 and a demonstration into what and who the clans are. Again, I just could never see in a million years like the other members of her star turning on the clans like they did. It's just not feasible really, but we'll just park that anyway and leave it, because I think, again, in service of the story, which we can get into now, because I thought the story was absolutely superb. Like, I'll just go on record of saying this. I think it's the best thing ever told in BattleTech. Let me caveat that though. Okay, I will add some description for that. It's the best thing told electronically in BattleTech. I will always love like the Stackpole books. I think they are like the which this game kind of covers quite a bit of that in terms of it's got like the Kellhounds and the Wolves Dragoons in there. But as a book, like I can sit and read those books, and I love them for what they are and what they kind of did for the for the wider IP and for BattleTech in general. I'm talking though about when you add everything in, like the quality of the cutscenes, the quality of the dialogue. Like the way that they spoke to each other, the way that they did so much like show not tell, which I really appreciated. There was none of this as well. This is a trope in like modern storytelling where you have to live like vicariously through a character that's like ignorant or naive, or say that again, ignorant or naive of the particular culture that the story is exploring. They didn't do that in this. Like, it was just you kind of got dropped into it, and you heard these like really weird people talking about in like af and quief and just like expressions which like, what are they talking about? Now, we obviously know that as BattleTech fans, but they do it so often that eventually I guarantee that like somebody quite new to this IP would just get what it meant. Like, af means yes. Like little things like that, which I think they wrote it. It was written with passion and an understanding of the IP and the universe and what the clans are. And I think like I'll just allow them so much leeway in terms of what they did with the actual story, because they made it interesting and it was clearly well thought out. And just to like put a cherry on this, it is absolutely everything that MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries wasn't. MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries has possibly one of the worst, most boring like video game stories I've ever seen. Like nobody took any time over the writing of that. It was awful. The game itself, I think, became actually good, and the DLC I really enjoyed. But the actual core story and the characters in it were just nothing burgers. Like they were so boring. This though very much kind of orientates towards a proper narrative. Like every single character that you were going through that story with had something to do. So like Liam was like your like electronics guy, and his death really kind of creates that division, that like emotional turmoil in the team or the star. The kind of the main like support cast that you are with as well, like Cordero Perez and Sarah Weaver are fantastic. I particularly loved Sarah Weaver. I thought that was such a brilliant like portrayal. I thought the voice actor for it was absolutely fantastic. So just in terms of the story, that is the BattleTech movie that we will never get, right? Like that's it. So enjoy it, because I would like, and I'm sure someone has done this already on like YouTube. Someone will cut all those scenes together and just run it as a whatever it is, like a 1.5 hour movie. Although it's going to be slightly disjointed, obviously, without seeing all the kind of action that takes place on the battlefield. But I just go back to that point of we are so lucky that we had that someone was willing to kind of spend that much time doing the actual storyboarding and getting the just the tone right and developing the characters. And you feel as well, when Liam dies, you're like, oh, Liam. And at the end, obviously, I saw like Mia's death. She kind of goes out in a blaze of glory right in one of the last scenes. And you feel it, because actually Mia is probably the character that I liked the most, like early on. And then she just goes completely bonkers, and you have to watch her demise. But again, you have that like emotional tie, and for computer games, that's sometimes very, very difficult to do. But in this, I thought they got the actual like the story beats just like absolutely bang on. In fact, as I was watching it, I kept thinking to myself, could I improve this, or is there anything that I was like, oh, I just didn't like which way they went with that? And I really don't think there was. I think it was like, for that story, it was just it was intricate. There were no like corny, cheesy like silly moments or like bits which just like really took me out of it. There were no like stupid twists. It was very like it was methodical, but it was just well done. It was like a well constructed, solid narrative that I really appreciated. And I've not seen a BattleTech game do a story that well since Mech Commander 2, which I still think is like a complete work of art, that game. This, I think, was actually better than the Mech Commander 2 story. And you don't know how high that praise is, because I think the world of Mech Commander 2. I think it's just a brilliant story. This though, again with like the way that the animation is done and everything else. Regardless, I know some people. I saw some complaints about that the lips weren't necessarily in sync with the dialogue, but I don't care. I mean, that is so expensive to do anyway. I was just delighted that we got something at that like caliber and level, which is just brilliant to see. As I said, it is the the BattleTech movie that we will never get. Gameplay then. So let's get into the actual crux of the matter now in terms of what I felt about gameplay. I felt it was very good. Like I enjoyed a lot about the gameplay. I'll do some criticisms first, because I didn't think it was perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I thought it was very, very like repetitive, especially in like the missions where you're going up against the inner sphere, because you were just like churning through like thousands of mechs, and it just eventually if not for the story, I think I would have been quite bored. But the story really kind of elevated the gameplay element to it. Um, Saying that, that's not a criticism as such, because it's very difficult to tell that story about like the clans going into the inner sphere, because they do actually make very light work of it. Um, and I do think like they added enough like nuance and interest to it, which like it did. Like I said, it did make it interesting. It's not that it was boring. That's the wrong word for it. It just felt slightly repetitive, and the fact that you're on that track, it's not an open world game, so you're kind of going through that like railroad track thing. There were times where I was like, yeah, this like this part of this game is going on for a long, long time. But again, I'm really kind of apprehensive to give any criticism to that, because it was still very detailed and in depth, and I really did enjoy that about it. It's just the gameplay I felt sometimes slowed my experience down with like actually wanting to see what happened next. I think as well, like, and it's really difficult to articulate this. Like I said, I've just finished playing it, and my head's a little bit scrambled with like all the the flashing lights and everything. But that feeling that I've got now is like how I felt every time I stopped playing the game. After a few hours, it's intense, right? Like clan mechs are quick. It just felt like very intense, which is good. I mean, I'm not, again, no criticism of that, because you come away feeling like you've actually done something. It's problematic if it feels like really like you're not living like vicariously through it. So again, not a criticism, just an observation. Just it is a very quick paced game, and then they tried to like overlay this like tactical thing on it, which I thought was a slight waste of time. Or if they were going to do that, I would have advised them massively when you kind of switch to like tactical mode, just slow the time down by like a quarter so you can actually make decisions. But I was just finding that I just couldn't do that. In fact, because I play stick or controller, whatever you want to call it, it was really tough on that. Although there is a way you can kind of do it, like through the wheel that comes up, so you kind of give orders, and I do that quite a lot in the game. But it's like I couldn't give orders in real time as quickly as it would take for us to get like set upon by 20 inner sphere mechs, and then I just have to kind of rapid respond to it and do what I could. So yeah, they're kind of my main criticism. I suppose another one a little bit is once you kind of find that trick of being able to kind of swap out the Omnipod loadouts, and you can actually swap out the Omni sections of each mech, you can create like an absolute monster like S laser or M laser or M pulse or S pulse spammer, and just go in for headshots and just wipe everything out. That's not to say the game was easy. In fact, I thought certain missions in this game were extraordinarily difficult. Even on normal, I was like struggling with them sometimes. But it felt like there was only one way to win, right? And that I didn't particularly enjoy, because I like to play like varied mechs that were like, SRMs and LRMs, and I like to use like the AC equipment. But in this, it was just like, if you really want to win at it, you've got to know like that little trick of having like 12 energy points and just put in, I mean, you can do it like with the Nova quite early on, where you just put the S lasers on the arms, but then you kind of gravitate up and you're able to kind of unlock lots of different features for that mech or for all the other mechs, and you can really kind of bespoke make the mechs that you want. And I felt like the gameplay just made that a little bit boring, because everything just orientated towards the laser spam, which is kind of true in Battletech. That's kind of how it operates on tabletop for a lot of people. Again, not for me. I like to play with variety, even if it means that I lose. But, yeah, that's only a mild criticism. Anyway, it's still very fun to play, and it's absolutely fun, like hunting down headshots on mechs. In terms then of getting into the positive side of this, and there are a lot of positives for it. The gameplay looked gorgeous. I thought the maps looked brilliant. I've got my computer now, I think it's about 5 years old. When I bought it, it had like it was like top of the range. It's now very much not top of the range. It's probably like a, middle upper machine now. Can still play everything that I want to play on it, but sometimes I have to kind of put the graphics down to like maybe 75% of what it can do. In MechWarrior Mercenaries, though, I always felt like even if I kind of lowered the graphics, there was still some like churn, and I think it was more to do with the engine of the gameplay as opposed to my graphics card, because it's like no matter what I did, it was just like there was always like a little bit of problem. It didn't feel that smooth. In this game though, I never had like 1 second of churn, and I played it on like a, not like the highest end graphics, but on decent level. It never like slowed down. It never was in like I was on a big map where there were lots of units and things going on, which really kind of like impacted on the graphics. So I really, really appreciated that. Another thing that I loved about this game is the unlocking system for the mechs. So you had to basically play mechs to unlock all their features and secrets. So as I've mentioned before, like you could get different versions of the Omnimex, but then more than that, you could go into the Omnimech and swap out like the arm for the I don't know, whatever you wanted to do, like the B variant. You could stick that on a Prime if you wanted its certain components on the arm. When I found that out, that's when I was like, oh, I get this game now. This is quite easy, because I was just able to kind of make every mech exactly as I wanted to make them. And I was able to do a little bit of variety in there as well with my stars. So I was able to do like an LRM spammer mech. I was able to do up to like the Hellbringer. You can bring like ECM equipment and probes. I think everyone can bring a probe, but you can only bring an ECM. I think the heaviest level mech that you can bring it on is the Hellbringer, which does make sense. Although I did think it was a bit of a shame that you weren't able to get like an ECM mech on something like a in fact, you may have been able to get it on a gargoyle. I just didn't play the gargoyle because it's a terrible mech. But that would have been the natural mech to put it on, I think, or maybe the Executioner. The Executioner is a very quick like jump capable mech as well. So that probably could have done with some electronic equipment on there. But there's no options for it. You don't get any of the pod options for the ECM. But yeah, I love that part of it, because if there was a mech that you had like a real affiliation to, say whether it was like a Timberwolf or a Vulture or like the Warhawk, you were able to kind of just play it, like buy 3 of them, give it to 3 of your like star, and then you'd get like more experience points for doing, for fielding more of them on the battlefield and killing more things. And then you were able to unlock all those like chassis upgrades, so you could like make the mech faster. I just loved that. I loved that feature. It always kept me like really engaged in like the back end of the game, which was fun. It's slightly complicated, the back end of the game, I felt, and given that there was like just 0 tutorial, which I probably should have covered in the earlier part of this, that is a criticism. I think if you are new to BattleTech, good luck, because there was literally no any like appraisal on what to do or how to do it in terms of like what you had to do with your mechs in like the base. I say that I think you did get like I will have just flicked through it because I know what I'm doing with BattleTech, obviously, but I think you did get a screen which will have showed you some of the rudimentaries, but it really felt like it needed a talk through, like a 10-minute tutorial option of, well, this is a UAC weapon, and this can go on a ballistic point, and this is an LRM, and this is Artemis, and this is what Artemis does to them. You just got nothing like that. Like, unless you really kind of played around with it, which, a lot of people will do, but some people will get lost very quickly on that and just turn the game off. And I feel like that's a huge mistake that they made. I think it really did need a decent tutorial for quite a complicated game. Final point then, just on terms of another real positive, I loved the weaponry in this game. Like, the SRMs in particular were like a ginormous step up from the SRMs in MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. Like, you got this weird little like noise, like a and then the SRMs were just like, whew. It was so like exhilarating. Absolutely loved it. The Streak SRMs were fantastic as well. It's same system for what they were using in MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, but this one just it felt much easier to operate. Yeah, just SRMs big plus. UACs and like the LB10Xs were very similar to MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. But what I really liked in this as well, I loved how the lasers hit. It sounds really weird, but it felt like when you were hitting something, it was hot, and it felt dynamic. It felt like a laser would look. Whereas I always felt like in previous MechWarrior games, it looked like a little light strobe going pew 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 pew. This felt like a no. If that laser hits you, it's going to melt you. And I really enjoyed that. And if you get that laser spam, and then you get that M pulse or M laser or ERM laser like headshot, it's like you could just feel the cockpit like crushing down before you. Like it was really exhilarating. So really enjoyed that. So the future then of this game, and this is I think where this gets slightly interesting, because I kind of drew up my prediction for this, and given I'm on a hot streak and I got all my predictions pretty much bang on for this game, although granted that was after we saw the trailer, so I can't really take any credit for that. I'm going to talk now about DLC, and I think we will get DLC for this game because I would imagine that it will be quite successful. I don't know anything yet. I mean, obviously they'll probably take them about 3 months to ascertain what the success levels are like, just in terms of how many purchases they've got. I think, given that they released it in October, they'll be looking at doing maybe like a sale of it in December for Christmas, and I think at that juncture in January they'll then decide where they want to go. I'm sure they've got like a skeletal plan, but obviously they'll need green lighting from the studio depending on how much money it makes. But I feel very good about this. I think MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries did generally very well. That's why we got so much DLC and why we got this game. So pretty confident we'll get all this. But the question then is, what direction do you take? And I covered this a little bit in my predictions video, but I now feel like I'm far better placed to give like a more detailed synopsis of it. So I'm going to go through options, what I think they can do, and then how I would bring all that together and how I would package it up in DLC. So, given that this is like the clan game, you really would think that they will do the full like corridor invasion for each clan. But I think it's going to be more intricate and complicated than just doing like a repeat and rinse of what we've just seen for Smoke Jaguar. And I think that would be a terrible decision to do a rinse and repeat, because even though the clan changes, like Jade Falcon, their story is very much in line with what happened with Clan Smoke Jaguar. Then you've got like Clan Wolf and Clan Ghost Bear, where they're a lot more amicable. But you would be rinse and repeating at least, like 3 storylines, and at least 2 of them are going to be very, very similar to each other. So I would not do that. I think that would be a mistake. I'll put it another way, I think that would really kind of satisfy and sate big BattleTech fans. Like, I would enjoy that. I think for the casual player, that will get very boring. Like, you'd just be like, well, what am I doing with this Jade Falcon? Like, so I've got to go be this Jade Falcon. So yes, they've got a different logo and different people, and yes, I'm going up against House Steiner, but it's the same mechanic. I'm just going up and destroying lots of inner sphere mechs. So I don't think they should just do it like that. That would be, I think, a very, very poor idea. So what instead, I've kind of spelled out here how to do it, where you can cover all those areas, all those main clans, and bring in some of the supporting clans as well, like Clan Steel Viper. We've already seen a lot of Clan Nova Cat. Obviously, they appear a hell of a lot in this game, especially towards the latter end. So let's talk about first DLC then. So in terms of time frames, let's say it gets greenlit in, well, it might have been greenlit already, but let's say it gets greenlit in January. Excuse me. And they do the first DLC for like next fall, right? what do I think that DLC will be? Well, I think there are two options. The first is really obvious. That's Tukied. But I don't think it will be Tukied. In fact, I'll just preempt this by saying I think Tukied will be the second expansion of DLC. I think the first one will be Clan Ghostbar. Now, why do I think that? Well, Clan Ghostbar have, well, I mean, they've got a weird story, Clan Ghostbar. They are actually a Crusader clan, but they're kind of alright. A lot is made about them. A lot of people in like the BattleTech community talk about Ghostbar. I think there is some slight misunderstanding of them. They're always seen as like the nice clan, Clan Care Bear, if you will. But I think people think that because they have like family orientation. So unlike most clans, which it's just like the true bonds are like bred in vats, and it's a very individualistic society. Clan Ghost Bear like really promotes the idea of like the family unit. So there is a niceness to them, and I think that would be a good counter to playing Smoke Jaguar. So you get to see like a clan who, they are far more, in a sense, like they're far more matriarchal. Like even after the invasion, like yes, they do their invasion. Yes, the invasion is pretty heinous and bloody. But you've got stories with Ghost Bear, like really famous stories in BattleTech, like where they take one of the worlds by playing an American football game. Like that's the challenge that they get given, and then they just happen to be really good at American football and take the planet that way. Now, obviously, you're probably not going to do that you're definitely not going to do that in MechWarrior 5, unless you want to turn it into like a American football game, which some people might like. But I think Ghost Bear would be a good like direction to take it in because they are interesting and they are kind of set outside a little bit of the invasion in that. They do have a massively successful invasion. It's I think it's the Al Shine, I can never know how you pronounce it, Al Shine military district that they actually take from the Draconis Combine. So, and they take a lot of like the Rasselhag as well, which leads to the union of Clan Ghostbear and the Rasselhag Republic. I say union, some would call it a military dictatorship, but at least they're like nice and they're not like murderous against the the populace that they end up taking, unlike certain other clans who shall not be named. But for this purpose, I think Ghost Bear would be an interesting one to do. I think you could do it alongside like the latter part of the clan invasion as well. Like you could do it where they do maybe take that the Al Shane military district. That could actually be quite a nice DLC, and then show like the area that they kind of scoop out for themselves and all the geopolitics that exist with like the Kerenskis say that not Kerenskis per se. It's just like Ulrich Kerensky and Clan Wolf. And I think that would be a nice one. You could do that as like a bit of a starter for 10, bit of like a slow burner one, and just like an intro into the DLC that you want to do. Because I think that would then very nicely set us up for Tukied, which Tukied takes place in mid-3052. The Battle of Luthien that you just do with Clan Smoke Jaguar, that occurs in January 3052, so it's like a few months later. Tukied then, I think through doing like a Ghost Bear DLC, you could introduce like elements of all the other clans. Like you could do missions where like Jade Falcons show up, or you definitely have Clan Wolf in there at some level as well because they share part of the same corridor as Clan Ghost Bear. And then you could do Tukied as I think you'd have to do it from the clan's perspective. I think just thinking about my lore here from Tukied, Clan Wolf are the only clan that win, right? When they do their little weird clan trial-y things, where they kind of get suckered in, obviously, by Comstar and defeated, but Clan Wolf actually win their objectives, and for that reason, I'd give Clan Wolf Tukied. So you still win as a player. You can still win it, but you lose the war. And I think the fan base would love to see Tuckered. I think as well, if I had to guess, I think most people, including myself, would like to play it from the Inner Sphere perspective, but maybe they do that. Maybe you are. I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to kind of see. This is clan. This is MechWarrior 5 clans, right? So you don't want to be playing Comstar really. But maybe there is another like weird and wonderful way that they can spin it so that you can play the Comstar. You can play Comstar to some extent. I think then, so that brings us up to the end of the clan invasion, like the formal end of the clan invasion, not when Leo Showers dies and they kind of go and sit back for a year, but this is like there is a declaration signed when the clans lose at Tuckered that they are no longer allowed to expand into Inner Sphere space for, is it like 15 years, which they actually break, but clans, honourable, really. So that brings you up to 3052, and that would then cover like major DLC for both Clan Ghost Bear and Clan Wolf. And then, and this is where I think that the DLC would be like could be really stepped up. Jump into 3058, so that's like a several year period after the clan invasion. And then I would do the refusal war with Clan Jade Falcon. That then puts you up against Clan Wolf. It's kind of, if remembering my lore here, I didn't actually do any research on this because I just was kind of spitballing ideas to myself earlier. But I think like Jade Falcon get like a slight victory on that. So again, you can win with them to some extent. And that is a really like interesting story that kind of draws in so much of like the Inner Sphere politics, like the Battle of Coventry occurs in 3058, so you can do the whole like Fedcom collapse between Catherine Steiner Davian and Victor Steiner Davian and all that malarkey, so you can kind of bring those like entities into it and have it, tell it from the Jade Falcon perspective. So that then gets you every single clan. Plus, as well, you can put Clan Steel Viper in that because Steel Viper and Jade Falcon hate one another. So they'd definitely be a thing. And that would, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's everyone, right? That's the 4 invasion clans, and then there are 2 backup clans. That's Nova Cat and Steel Viper. There are others, right? What are they called? Diamond Shark. They're one of the backup clans as well because they take part in Tuckered, I think. Really should have looked at this before I started spieling about it, but regardless, it's irrelevant. Like you could literally incorporate every single clan that invades the Inner Sphere, so not the home clans, the invasion clans, into it and bring it up to that time period. Why I also think it's really important they do a jump up from 3052 to 3058 is in that 6-year period you get a host of like new technologies and mechs and advancements from the Inner Sphere. So it's going to be a very different game. Like it's no longer the clans just like cutting through their opponents. At that juncture, like House Steiner are like very, very competent and good. They've created like numerous. They've created their own Omni-mechs. They've created like mechs that have got all the what used to be considered lost tech on there. So even though it's like lesser Inner Sphere versions, they've got the industrial might, but they've now got like all the weapon improvements. The UACs, the M-Pulse weaponry, or the Pulse weaponry, the ER weaponry. Like they had it before, but now it's like just standard. Like it's no longer rare. It's just there because the clans, they were able to kind of leap forward like a hell of a long way with all the tech that they were able to get hold of during the clan invasion, which the game that I've just played, actually deals with very, very well. Like it's constantly showing you like the Inner Sphere, how they like pilfer like clan stores to kind of steal their mechs and things like that. That's done very, very well. And then finally, I think this would be the final DLC, and I've already talked about this when I did my prediction video, but I think that brings you beautifully then to do Operation Bulldog in 3059, and basically the annihilation of Clan Smoke Jaguar. And if I was going to be a betting man, I would say that you would take charge of Clan Novacat for that. Um, I mean, it would be a joint effort, right? So I'm sure like you'll have Anastasius Faucht there, and Victor Steiner Davian will be there because he's very prominent during that time period. I think that's when he gets Prometheus, who is his direwolf. So, and you basically, I mean, there's no other way to put it really. You annihilate Clan Smoke Jaguar, you charge them back to Huntress and wipe them out. And nobody is disappointed by it. Everybody is very, very happy with it, including the clans, because Clan Smoke Jaguar are not popular, especially at that juncture. And it's kind of it's really that like cathartic end point of the clan invasion, because it's brought like full circle. Even though like Tukiid is the formal end, that's the kind of the spiritual end of the clan invasion, because the Inner Sphere actually win. I do think I've said this before when I've talked about like the clans before. I still think that it is just completely like outside of the realms of possibility that the Inner Sphere would allow the clans to like stay on their borders. I think they would just wage relentless warfare until they were all annihilated. But at that juncture, I suppose they've got a lot more industrial might because they've taken over like vast swathes of the Inner Sphere, so probably easier said than done. But there is kind of there's an uneasy peace, and then obviously that line pushes you on into the Fedcom civil war and the jihad, and you end up with like the clans then at that point become almost secondary to the story, and they then, going way into the future, then it's then picked up again during the Ilkhan era, which is like 100 years after the clan invasion. So that's my prediction for it. Outside of the Ghost Bear one, I think the Ghost Bear one that I'm doing there is slightly spurious, but I think everything that I've said for Tukiid, the Refusal War, and Operation Bulldog, I'd be pretty confident that they'll happen. I do hope they do something with Ghost Bear, though. They shouldn't be lost in the mix there, and they are a major clan. They do get mentioned at least once in the game as well, although they're laughed at. It's like when someone does something nice, they're like, oh God, what are you, a Ghost Bear? Like, you're so nice. Or something like that. Some like weird comment like that. So, final review then. What do I feel about and think about this game? I thought it was brilliant. I thought, for all I've kind of gone through there, 50 minutes we're up to now. And I did, there were certain things that I didn't like about it. But on the whole, as an experience, as a BattleTech fan, as, I'm not a massive computer gamer, but just in terms of, like, what it gives to the the MechWarrior series, I thought it was probably about as good as we could get. I suppose the argument is to say, well, it could have been open world, should have been open world. I'm actually fine with how they did it when they had it like on the track. I do think as well, just be patient. I think we will get like an open world variant of this when the DLC is done. Or put another way, I think they might even if any of you played Total Warhammer, there are 3 parts to that game. So it's like, whatever you want to call it, version 1, version 2, version 3. They sell each one as a standalone game, but they incorporate all the games together. So you can play on like a giant map of the old world as like the Empire, or one of the Orc tribes, or one of the undead factions, or whatever else within like the old world like Warhammer map, and they bring everything together. And that's the genius of doing it. Like, there are like standalone areas, like you can do like certain scenarios where you're just playing like, I don't know, Beastmen in one of the forests or something. But like as a whole, the game, and it's not a game I've actually played too much of. I own it all because I'm really like I actually bought it just so I can have the full map of the Warhammer world because I do like old world, and I do play it occasionally. But I'm not a big video game player. But you could do that with MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries and this game in the long run. You could like merge the two together and then play the game with an updated map where you've got like the clan invasion corridors with the areas that they've taken. and then maybe then the game just becomes completely open world. So you can start as like a clan force or a mercenary unit or a house unit or something like that, and just go at it and decide what you want to do. And it gives you like a, well, I mean, I suppose the jihad occurs in 3067, so you get like a 16-year window before that happens. One interesting thing as well, I'll bring this up and I'll end the video because that brings us nicely up to nearly an hour. There's a very interesting mission in this. I think it's on. I can never say this. It's like a French name. Is it Courcheval? I think it's called like Shadow of the Past or Message from the Past. You get a mission. You get a mission where you see a message from Kerensky, right? So Alexander Kerensky like rocks up and he's like, "I am Alexander Kerensky." Blah 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 blah. So it's a really interesting mission. You go into like an old Comstar installation unit, and there is something fascinating that happens during that mission. Like, so you see Kerensky's mission. That's actually not that fascinating, but then you see a message from I think it's like the head of Comstar. Is it? I want to say it's Evans. It's like I can't remember his name. Is it like Michael Evans? The name rings a bell. Anyway, I don't know if he's like a really prominent character in BattleTech history, but he goes on there and says, Comstar, it's like there's like a cult now trying to kind of take over Comstar, and we've got to stop this from happening. And I was like, oh my goodness, are they going to do the Word of Blake? Like, is that something that they've got in the pipeline that they're like now setting down parameters for? Because that is what that story is, right? Like, Comstar is taken over by a cult. Although, to be fair, it does factor into this game, because one of the interesting characters that you see in there is there is like a Comstar liaison officer, because Comstar actually do side with the clans and do give them all the intel. They do that for their own purposes. Eventually they turn against the clans, but during the invasion they're kind of doing what's right for Comstar, as Comstar always do. And that character, I think it may be kind of, if maybe I'm reading too much into it, maybe it just kind of aligns into her a little bit, in that Comstar are duplicitous. I don't know, but I just felt that was really interesting. It's the first time I think I've ever seen like the Word of Blake referenced in a digital product. I said like an official digital product. Like, there's certainly nothing of that in Mech Commander 2, and I've played that game through multiple times. And that brings you right up to the end of the Fedcom Civil War. So that's when very soon after that the jihad happens. But yeah, I just like I said, I just felt that was really, really interesting. So something to keep your eyes on, especially when they put the DLC out. Like, is Comstar going to be in there again at the Battle of Tukiad? Is there going to be a faction in there that is very much of the Blakist mindset? So yeah, interesting. Anyway, so a lot of food for thought there, and I've gone on for an hour, and my voice is croaking, and it's very late at night, and I've got to be up for work in the morning. So I am going to leave it there. I will probably try and record some videos later this week. I'll probably put this one out I might just let it upload overnight, and there has been an update on the Kickstarter, and I might actually do a tutorial for MechWarrior 5. I'm not going to play the game. I might go into to show like how the omnipods work, because I get the feeling a lot of players would struggle with that game. I could be wrong, but some of it is really quite challenging, and I know how it works, right? Like, I know how to mid-max out a mech and a star, and yet granted, I am playing on a controller, so that really kind of gives me a disadvantage. But I still feel like I was able to walk through MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries on hard quite easily, or I don't even know if they have hard, but I will have played it through on hard, I'm sure, if the option was there. This one I didn't. This one I just played through on normal, and I'm glad that I did, because certain missions on it were absolutely brutal. Anyway, pretty much exactly an hour now, so I am going to leave it there. I am going to thank you for watching, and I will hopefully catch you again next time.